Thanks for being here. I'm Hilary Jensen. I'm the CEO of ObiDog. We are a digital pet health and wellness company, and using our smart bowl system, we individualize your pet's nutrition for happier, healthier lives. And currently we're focusing on dogs, and you can find us at obidog.com. I am delighted today to have two leaders in the animal health industry in innovation and data science, Dr. Dean Lairmore, or Dr. Michael Lairmore, excuse me. He is the Dean of UC Davis Veterinary School of Medicine, and Kerryann Kocher, who is the CEO of Vytelle, which is an bovine IVF company, and I'll let her talk to that a little bit more. Dr. Lairmore is from Missouri originally. He has his DVM from the University of Missouri, PhD from Colorado State, and has also worked with the Center of Disease Control, the CDC, which we're very familiar with these days. His list of awards and publications are too numerous to even start, and he specializes in veterinary pathology, microbiology, and immunology. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And then Kerryann Kocher is a graduate of Iowa State University. She started her career at Elanco Animal Health and later joined Bayer as head of the U.S. animal food business. She founded a consulting practice to help farmers, ranchers, and producers optimize their use of technology. And she was working with Vytelle and is now the CEO and has been for the last year. Welcome, Kerryann. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off with our first question. We'll be focusing on innovations in technology and data science, and then wrapping up with a focus on the human aspect, which is the changing skill set that we interacting with technology and data need to have. So can you tell us, Kerryann, a little bit more about Vytelle, and then also how you're using technology and data science to differentiate your company?
You bet. Thank you, Hilary. Just a pleasure to be here and get to see a lot of faces on my screen. It'd be much better if we were in person, of course, but really looking forward to the discussion today. So I'll share a little bit more about Vytelle. So Vytelle is a precision livestock company that is really focused on fast-forwarding genetic progress in the bovine space. And as we think about the problems that we saw, there's two big high-stake questions that our customers or cattle producers ask themselves or have to decide when they're thinking about genetic progress. And that first one is mating selection, and the second one is reproduction method. And those are high-stake, long-term decisions. And if we get it right, we can move genetic progress, fast-forward genetic progress quite easily. If we get it wrong, we have to live with the consequences for many, many years. And as we think about a more progressive cattle business, dairy and beef, we think that genetic progress is one of the fastest ways and most probable ways that we can deliver beef in a much more sustainable way. And so as we've brought our company together, like Hilary mentioned, we have like three core capabilities. One of those capabilities is in vitro fertilization, and we do that in a modern way with no hormones and are able to make genetic progress really fast and effective through the IVF process. On the other hand, we also have the GrowSafe system technology within our company as well. And GrowSafe is known for phenotypic data capture when we talk about feed intake and weight gain of individual animals. And then the third capability that Vytelle pulls together is really the glue that pulls those two capabilities together. And that's our genetic analytic engine that we licensed from a company called Sonomics just earlier this year. And that genetic analytic engine takes that information from our phenotypic data capture, environment management, big omnic data sets. And what we're able to do is really compute that data in a way that looks at combinations of genetic trait signatures. And what this allows us to do is take look at and identify unique, elite animals from the phenotypic data and from the genetic component, and then move it all the way through our system, reproduce those elite animals using IVF. So we're kind of a full service, if you will, way of going from elite identification or mating selection all the way to reproduction method and solving the problem of genetic progress in the beef and dairy industries.
Wow, fantastic. That's far better than my description and my cursory level of understanding of what you do. Dean Lairmore, would you like to share how you're using technology and data science right now with the School of Medicine?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. And looking over the agenda for today, I can see a number of areas in which the kind of the touch points of what we're going to talk about touch upon the audience. Our mission at the School of Veterinary Medicine here at UC Davis is to address societal needs, and we do that through a One Health approach, which covers a lot of the topics that you just heard about, including that interface between animals, people, and the environment. So much of what we do depends upon technology, and that's why the Digital Animal Summit really is, we have a number of examples of that going on in our educational systems. For example, the way we teach veterinary students, the training in the future for what veterinary students require to interface with their stakeholders in the environment, in their environment that they find themselves in, to the type of faculty we're hiring. Never did I dream we would be hiring folks from mathematicians from Caltech on faculty, those that had the skill sets to be able to analyze data across the whole of our campus. The data science initiatives impact all what we do. So I'm looking forward to talking about specific examples, but I can tell you that both in education, our research mission, which we lead the nation in research funding among all the veterinary schools, over $85 million annually, to our outreach to the community. All of those are impacted by data science and digital technology. I look forward to the discussion today.
Great, thanks a lot. So I'd like to talk about those specific examples. Could you give us some specific examples, and then also talk about the associated challenges that you have today?
Yeah, I'll just mention a few of them, covering some of the topics later today. For example, in the small animal field, our faculty are analyzing data, and using artificial intelligence to develop new ways to approach old problems. These range from vaccine manufacturing and immunology to analyzing diseases in small animals. Recently, we've hired a new faculty member to understand and try to use artificial intelligence to approach Addison's disease. One of the problems in small animal medicine with a disease like that is it's multisystemic and very difficult. And using algorithms based upon that, she was able to come up with an algorithm, publish that, and be able to explore how we could use artificial intelligence in that way. And we've recently hired faculty with those data skill sets. Our other data scientists are actually interfacing and trying to understand the value of using data sets from multiple sources. Many of the questions that we're involved in involve both the environment, as I mentioned, but also how do we analyze that data and talk between data sets. A good example is avian influenza. The California Animal Health and Food Safety System answers through the School of Veterinary Medicine. We coordinate that effort. Our scientists working within that, and also our cooperative extension, annually have to deal with artificial intelligence and data sets, meteorologic data. Where's the rainfall at? Where are the wild birds at? Wild birds carry influenza. How do we use that satellite data and compare that to where wild bird sampling may predict the next avian influenza outbreak? Those are some simple examples, but really explore data sets that we never thought we would ever be involved in, from meteorologic data to environmental data. And I think that's the trend that you're seeing throughout our research, throughout our educational systems.
Great, and I wanted to also suggest from our viewers today too, if you can get prepared to ask questions, and then feel free to start asking them in the chat area, and we'll pick those up in the last 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the discussion to make sure that we get your questions answered. Kerryann, would you mind giving some more examples and talk about the challenges? We've had some fun talking about these.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that the Dean just mentioned is just all of those different data sets and how do we bring them together and make sense of it all and really identify what are the signals that we're hearing in those data sets. And that's really one of the key components to our genetic analytic engine is taking in that production data, that performance data, the weather data, the management data, and all of this, the genetic information, and really make sense to identify signals that we can act on. And one of the challenges with doing this, as we've really been proving out the use of that genetic analytic engine, I was giving the example to Hilary the other day, is that we went to a really large dairy in the UK, and we were accessing all of their genetic and their performance information, and we were able to pull that information out of 14 different systems. And so 14 different systems, some with duplicate data, some with one piece of data that we wanted to pull from that system. And we had to pull all that information, reorganize, reassess, make sure it made sense for us to be able to analyze. And this is the everyday challenge. I mean, from a production or a producer perspective, is they're trying to make sense of that information. And they believe all of those metrics were so important that they got a system in place to capture them and measure and manage to them. However, are we really finding the nuggets? Are we really seeing the signal that are going to allow us to make better decisions? And particularly those two decisions that I talked about earlier that we really care about, that mating selection decision and that reproduction method decision. And so how do we use that information to do that? And that's just one of the everyday challenges that our producers face, but we as Vytelle also face as we really look at bringing those data sets together. This is one of the biggest challenges or issues that we see that seems like a simple one. The data is available. We have it. We know, people are collecting it. We know it's accurate. But really being able to pull it all together seems to be a hill that we have to constantly battle.
Michael, do you want to add to that?
Building off of that, I think one of the things that we face is that ability to advise as veterinarians, our stakeholders in making decisions. And, that's a really important function of the veterinarian, be able to use that data to be able to make a decision, whether it be a small animal client or in the dairy industry. Right now we're investigating robotics and being able to assess the economic value of the robotic machinery in terms of the dairy industry. How do we analyze that data in such a way that, in our case as veterinarians, what are the health outcomes? Are the robotic function in a way that help the production economically for the farmer, but also for the health outcome of the animal? And to be able to do that, actually the skill sets that are needed are really people that understand both epidemiology, they have to understand maybe even engineering. So we're working much more with engineering than we ever have in the past in veterinary medicine, with the health outcomes, certainly. So it also involves skill sets of communicating not only the data, but with other disciplines. And I think that's a really important point throughout the day that you're going to find, is that people need to talk across disciplines to solve these problems. So while the data is there, we also need to realize that it's people behind the data as well.
And that's a great transition to the human aspects, I think, that we wanted to cover. You've spoken to me about the changing backgrounds that you see, and then also the skill sets that your students need and that you're preparing them for. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, one of the things that we teach a lot is communication skills, the ability to talk to our clients in a way that they understand, but also be able to be emotionally intelligent enough, to be able to have resilience enough, to be able to talk and explain what the situation is. But then, as I mentioned, working with other disciplines. In the field, for example, when we go globally and we're talking about solving problems in middle to low income countries, we need actually social scientists in addition to the scientists that we're working with. So you could go in there and solve a water problem, an animal health issue, but if you're not really talking about how do the implementation of that happen on a social scale and a community scale, it doesn't necessarily work. So what we really have to teach our veterinarians today is to be able to interact, communicate, and even understand business skills. We have started a innovation with the Graduate School of Management around business, with a certificate program with veterinary business in mind. We've also started an entrepreneurship academy with the Graduate School of Management, in which we mix in medicine, engineering teams together. And that's where the best outcomes, that's where the startups are coming from. They're actually interactive between disciplines, and they have to be able to talk to each other as well.
That's great, Kerryann. I see lots of nodding heads in our background. So I know you have a lot to say about this too.
Well, I just think adding on to what the dean is just mentioning here, I mean, real life example for Vytelle is really operating between that phenotype data capture all the way down to IVF. That's a pretty broad landscape of disciplines that we need in our R&D team to really drive our business forward. And one of the roles, we're recruiting lots of new roles as we continue to grow throughout 2020 and 21. And we were looking for we were looking for maybe one person who possibly would have this biostatistician, data science, quantitative geneticist background, and was able to cast a vision for the future, and was able to translate that to what it meant to cattle producers, and fit into our culture, and really was able to drive our future portfolio forward. That's a unicorn of a hire today. And so specifically, even when we get down to the very specifics of cattle production, right? So we have to look across, just like the dean was saying. I mean, having that as part of the curriculum within the vet school is certainly helpful, because we're the receiver of those, and this is what the real business is requiring right now, and it's what the future business is going to require, and it's something of a challenge to find. And so what we often have to do is we have to find a translator in between, and that becomes even more tricky. So I think this is the current challenge that we're faced with today, and I think we will be for a while. But I think it's right on to the point of the curriculum of what the dean was mentioning, and we need that cross-functional view.
Fantastic.
It actually reminds me of when I was sitting in graduate school in the early 1980s studying ovine progressive pneumonia, which most people on this phone call may or may not know, but that was a lentivirus and a retrovirus. And right after that, the AIDS virus in people was discovered. And all of a sudden, we had to take advantage of all that knowledge in the veterinary field to understand these viruses in people when it became a major pandemic. We're seeing that right now with COVID. The knowledge that we learned from things like the PREDICT program, which is, where we're in 34 countries trying to sample animals at that interface, is used to basically form the basis of the early genomic sequences that allow us to develop the diagnostic test in a rapid fashion. So not only the speed of diseases around the world, but the impact of that means that we have to have multiple disciplines, and also the technology, in this case, high genome sequencing, to be able to develop the diagnostic tests that we need at that interface. So the training of the people, the technology, and then asking the right questions. And then that requires the public health interface. So not only do we have to have that knowledge as scientists, but then we need to communicate it to the public. In this case, for COVID, we've seen the breakdowns is with the public health system. And so that is the link, the weak link in the chain in this case, and what happened. So I think that great, we're involved right now. Everybody is being affected by COVID. And I think it's a great illustration you'll see throughout the day. No matter what technology we come up with, we still need to communicate that to the public, to the consumer, in the case of Kerryann, to her stakeholders as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you both. And I'd like to turn to questions from our visitors. And I have my favorite student or visitor, Umair, has asked for Kerryann. Would you like to ask your question, Umair?
Sure, yeah. So Kerryann, just it's been obviously an interesting and challenging year for everybody. I'm sure it has been a challenging year for Vytelle and for you. What was your biggest challenge as a CEO amid the pandemic? And then if you can regale us with a nice upside as well.
Yeah, a good challenge, man. There's been so many. I mean, how do you prioritize the biggest one? I think it's really keeping operational consistent and business continuity has been the biggest challenge. And early in the pandemic, the biggest issue was we didn't know what we didn't know, and we didn't know what policies should we have in place, what positions must we take, how do we protect our team. And now we know a bit more, right, than we did then. But now we're really seeing more people being exposed, and business continuity is even more challenged. And so organizing the team in a way so that we can separate teams and keep operational, and it's required us to, completely different logistics, particularly around our IVF business as we move around the field and collect oocytes all over the countryside and bring them back to our labs. It's required us to really orchestrate the business in a different way. The upside to that is it required us to orchestrate the business in a different way. I mean, the business model of moving people around isn't a sustainable one in the midst of COVID. And so it's required us to identify different ways of different business models, particularly on our GrowSafe side, where how do we install and build out our infrastructure in local countries versus transferring people from Calgary, for example, to do installs in Kazakhstan. That's not a long-term solution amidst COVID. So it forced us to get a much more robust supply chain, a much more robust business model than we probably would have thought about before. We wouldn't have made those transformations as fast as we've had to make those transformations. So I think that's a great upside. I think we're ready to go in 21 because now we kind of know what we have to deal with. But I think for everybody, I would just, the last comment I would make, I mean, probably one of the overarching real challenges is how do you build a brand new company culture amidst sitting on the phone like this? I have a brand new executive team that's never sat in a room face to face with each other.
Wow.
Just going to pause on that for a minute. I've hired 4 people that I've never physically met, right? Those are life-changing differences in how we operate business. And specifically, I'm going to go soft here just for a minute, but the game-changing difference for us was our team's willingness and culture to really put trust first. So we didn't have time to earn each other's trust and kind of figure it out and get to know each other and go to lunch and, grab a cocktail after work. That didn't exist. It was strict business. It was on the computer. It was us looking at each other's, home offices, right? And that's how we saw each other. And we really had to jump in wholeheartedly with one another and say, we're going to move this forward, even though I've never sat in a room with you. And that is probably the biggest game changer, I would say, of all of those things I've mentioned. The fact that that's a core part of our culture now will advance us far farther than having new business models in foreign countries. And I think it's something that I'm truly grateful that COVID's given us that opportunity.
Yeah, I just might add to that in terms of what's changed. I know some of the questions on chat are related to what's changing in education. And I think one of the things that we're seeing very similar to what Kerryann, we had to flip immediately to go online in March, and all of our faculty and staff did a great job of that. We were already pre-recording most of the lectures, so that wasn't a problem. But really the practical learning, the clinical aspects, all the veterinarians in the country had to shift and learn a new way of operating, a new way to communicate with their clients, a new way to keep their staff safe. On our campus, we came up with new ways to test. We actually used agriculture, the IntelliCube, to actually do saliva-based testing on a weekly basis. So all of us, faculty, staff, and students, get tested weekly now in a saliva-based test. That new technology was taking advantage of what we knew in agriculture and shifting it to a human pathogen on campus in a practical way. So you take a large population of people to test for that. But in addition to all of what we've learned about how to operate safely in this kind of environment, to the testing part, as Kerryann mentioned, it's also the human part. And so the downside is obviously the mental health and wellness of our staff and our employees, and being able to communicate in a way that maintains that and interact, that human interaction. You know, we're an evolved species and we haven't evolved to work on Zoom. So we need to have that human interaction. And so I think that's what we're also learning, how to better to do that in a safe way with our students and with our faculty in this new COVID environment. One of the things that I think in the future, you know, we envision that the veterinarian will use technology all the way through from, you know, at the AVMA Economic Summit, we saw some great examples of that, you know, where the data is being collected from the food bowl of how much the animal is eating in mobile devices in ways that communicate between people, between the veterinarian, the stakeholder directly, because our stakeholders, they want that information, they want that conductivity. So telehealth is going to be huge, be able to use that effectively to follow up, but also monitoring animals remotely, being able to take that data, synthesize that into the medical record, and then make good decisions with that. So you need to take the technology, but make the good decision with the ultimate benefits for the health of the animal. So, you know, I think we're all going to be affected like that. We could talk about that all day, but I'm sure we're going to hear examples throughout the day about those as you have these other sessions.
We have just a few more minutes, and I'm going to combine a few questions that I see, and many of them are near and dear to my heart, which is about entrepreneurship with animal health. And perhaps both of you can address what initiatives perhaps either your company and or the school have with investors or incubators, and then mentors to encourage students, either students or also entrepreneurship at Vytelle.
I'll let Kerryann maybe start on that one.
Yeah, sure. So a couple different things I would say. So we are a bit of a startup and non-startup all wrapped into one. So over this past year, we really combined two companies, one of which was 30 years old and another that was just 3 years old, to really put these three core capabilities that I shared earlier together and start off on a new journey with a new product line and a new value proposition. And so we're technically 6 months old, so we're right in the heart of starting up. We just have infrastructure that maybe lags or leads us a bit more so. So that's what our current scenario. I think as we think about innovation, we think about working with investors. This is something that we're part of the Wheatsheaf family and Wheatsheaf Group, which is an ag tech investor very focused on really moving sustainable agriculture forward, and that has been a real blessing to be part of a community there that provides that support and that coaching and really helps drive us forward as we get our feet on the ground. And so that's my experience specifically with our key stakeholder. I think you asked a question about internships.
Oh, sorry, intrapreneurship.
Entrepreneurship. Yeah, okay. Gotcha. I wanted to make sure. So I'll turn it over to the dean here to let him share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we're really trying to do is take the because we are at the heart of new ideas. I mean, we're creating new knowledge. So as our faculty and our students get involved in that, we need to help them with the innovation environment. So we've partnered again with the Graduate School of Management in the Entrepreneurship Academy. And what we do with that is take folks that are at all stages. They could have an idea, they could already have a patent, they may have a startup company, but we have a curriculum in that Entrepreneurship Academy, mixing with graduate students, faculty from engineering and medicine together, and thinking about how do they work together, and then teaching them things like tech transfer, market analysis, how do you do a pitch? And we actually, at the third day of that, have them meet with venture capitalists. We have them meet with those people that have, like Kerryann, for example, that have developed or run companies, so that they get that interface and they actually pitch to those folks and be able to start it. Not all of them want to do that. Some of them just want to publish their work and go on and go through the academic range. But a lot of them do want to develop companies. They do want to do that. So we've created this interface for that. Not only that, but after they get started, then we give them startup funds, and we have ways in which we use those through the Office of Research to get them into that valley of death before they die, an early death. And we have collaborations with companies, with stakeholders to help fund those. And between those, we've seen a real uptake in our startup companies and our patents filed. And so by supporting the early ideas and then having those interact directly with entrepreneurs, we found that to be the magic sauce. And so again, getting people together, we're doing it virtually next summer. We're having our Entrepreneurship Academy in July, and be glad to share that information. But it's on our website. It's within the Graduate School of Management as well.
That's great.
We're at time right now, and I just wanted to ask our guests in the last minute, perhaps, if you had anything that you wanted to wrap up with to share with the audience, or if we're ready, we'll transition over to the next talk.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody, and to these kind of conferences, I think, are best when we get together with practical solutions. And again, going back to how do we interact with our society? How do we solve societal needs? And I think that's all we all have in common, whether it's a small animal, whether it's large animals, or whether it's people. I think it's all about addressing societal needs, and that's certainly what we're all about.
I would just close by just taking that all the way to the practicality of, through what the dean is doing from the university perspective, and getting our workforce ready for us, who are going to be hiring and moving and really driving that value at the customer level, all the way down to production and those producers that are going to make those decisions that drive a more sustainable food system. I mean, I can see the flow all the way through there. And I think that it was just great to hear the connectivity, just like the data that we're trying to connect all the way through to become more digital. I mean, I think the people need to connect all the way through, and that's the thing that I think is probably one of the most critical pieces that can't be overlooked. So pleasure to be here with you today, and really appreciate the time.
Thanks to you both.
Yeah, thank you very much.